She left me for her affair partner expecting my family's trust fund. She got a lawsuit instead. Hey there. I'm Nolan, 30 years old. I'm not sure how to begin, but I guess I'll just lay it all out here. My whole life, I've been aware that most of my so-called friends stuck around because, in their eyes, I was the trust fund baby. They cozied up to me thinking I'd be throwing extravagant parties across the globe or footing the bill for endless rounds of booze. And when they realized I wasn't that guy, they vanished. Yeah, it's true my parents set up a hefty trust fund for me. But I've always respected how much effort they poured into building that fortune. I understood early on that it didn't just magically appear overnight. One wrong move could crumble everything my dad worked for, so I dedicated myself to putting in the hard work every single day to grow what he started. But I came dangerously close to undoing it all not too long ago. Now, let me tell you about Tessa, the love of my life, or at least, that's what I believed. She's my wife, or was 28 years old. Back in college, I didn't date. Casual relationships weren't my thing. I wasn't interested in hooking up or anything fleeting. I wanted a partner to build a life with, someone I could marry. But once word got out about my parents' wealth, the wrong kind of people started showing up in my life. Money has this way of drawing attention. People want to latch on and benefit from it. Sure, I lent some cash to friends here and there and covered drinks a few times, but I never indulged in the kind of over-the-top generosity folks expected from a trust fund kid. I've always believed in moderation. It's important to stay grounded and connect with others, but I was careful not to let anyone too close. Then came my graduation party. That's when I met Tessa. She didn't seem to know who I was, and we struck up a conversation that just flowed naturally. I don't know how else to put it, it clicked right away. We exchanged numbers, and on our first date, I took her to McDonald's. Nothing fancy, just simple. And you know what? We had the best time. She didn't care that it wasn't extravagant, and that's when I started falling for her. Tessa was different. She wasn't trying to impress me or play a part. She was smart, funny, and genuine. For the first time, I felt like someone saw me for who I was, not for the money tied to my name. After about a month of dating, I brought her home to meet my parents. She didn't act surprised when she realized my family was wealthy. She seemed completely unfazed. I thought that was a good sign, a sign she wasn't in it for the money. I didn't realize back then that her calm acceptance might have been part of a carefully laid plan. That first meeting went great. Tessa was graceful and charming, and I was completely smitten. She was the first woman I ever introduced to my parents, and they were over the moon about it. For the next year, we dated, and during that time, she wouldn't accept any expensive gifts. Her reasoning was simple: we weren't married yet. After a year, I proposed, and she said yes. Tessa wasn't just sweet to me, she was amazing with my parents. She even made a single request that they never ask her to quit her job because she wanted to contribute to building our future together. My mom hugged her, saying how glad they were that I'd found someone so supportive. Tessa worked for an IT company and made decent money on her own. She also traveled a lot for her job. On our second anniversary, my parents threw a party to celebrate. That night, they announced they wanted to include Tessa as a beneficiary of the trust fund, right alongside me. They introduced her to everyone, including Wesley, the trustee. Wesley was an accountant for the company overseeing the trust and investments. He was married, and his wife worked as a lawyer in the same firm. Everything seemed secure and above board. Tessa's name was officially added as a beneficiary. From that point on, Tessa grew even closer to my parents. She was constantly doing things to make them happy, and every time there was a party, she'd dress up and charm the crowd. Looking back, though, I realized she spent a little too much time chatting with Wesley at these events. They'd stand off in a corner, laughing and smiling, and I never gave it a second thought. I was so blindly in love with her that the idea of doubting her seemed ridiculous. Turns out, I should have doubted her. The two of them had been carrying on an affair behind my back. Tessa was, well, a master manipulator. She made everyone feel special, myself included, so there was no reason to suspect a thing. But she was just waiting for the right time to reveal her true intentions. 7 years into our marriage, both my parents passed away within 6 months of each other. Losing them was unbearable, and I threw myself into my work just to cope. That's when Tessa started to change. After the funerals, she became distant. At first, I figured it was her way of grieving and gave her space, but she didn't say a single word about my parents or ask how I was holding up. I thought that was odd, but I also blamed myself for not opening up. 2 weeks later, I decided to leave work early one evening to talk things through with her. On my way home, I stopped to pick up some pink roses, her favorite. When I got there and unlocked the door, I walked in to find Wesley standing in my living room. I was confused and asked if he was there to discuss something about the trust fund. Then Tessa appeared from behind him, dragging 2 suitcases. That's when I noticed Wesley had suitcases too. She looked at me, shrugged, and said, "Oh, dang. I was hoping to do this quietly. I meant to leave you a note, but I guess we'll just have to do this face to face. I'm leaving you, Nolan." Yep, I'm moving in with Wesley right after we get back from our vacation in Italy. Tessa looked at me with that casual smirk of hers and said, "Your parents made sure I'd have enough money to afford this. Oh, and by the way, we're divorcing. Wesley's filing for one too." She paused and glanced at the flowers in my hand. "Are those for me?" "I'll take them. Thanks." Before I could even process what was happening, they were out the door. I heard the car engine start, then fade away into silence. And just like that, my wife of 7 years was gone. Have you ever heard someone describe the world collapsing in front of them? That's exactly how I felt. For the next 2 days, I didn't leave the house. I didn't open the blinds. I lived off leftovers and instant noodles, barely managing to eat. The TV stayed on constantly. I needed the noise to drown out the crushing silence. Bathing? Forget it. I felt too defeated even to care. On the 3rd day, the doorbell rang. I ignored it, figuring whoever it was would go away eventually. But they didn't. The ringing kept getting louder, more insistent, as if whoever was outside had made it their personal mission to annoy me. After 10 minutes, it escalated to banging, and then I heard a woman's voice shouting through the door. "I know you're in there. Open up. Right now. I'm not leaving until you talk to me." For a moment, my heart jumped. I thought it might be Tessa. But then I remembered she was Wesleyably sipping wine in Italy with Wesley. That realization hit me like a fresh wave of heartbreak, but the banging wasn't stopping. So, I dragged myself out of bed, shuffled to the door, and unlocked it. Standing there was a woman with fiery red hair, dressed in a sharp 2-piece suit. She looked like she was ready to tear me apart. "Your wife ran off with my husband," she said, staring me down. "Sitting here feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to help anyone. Get up, take a shower, and meet me in the living room in 15 minutes. We need to talk." When I didn't respond, she barged past me, wrinkled her nose, and muttered, "What? You stink." I sighed and mumbled, "Okay, Mom," as I trudged toward the bathroom. I heard that, she shot back, and I couldn't help but laugh. It was the first time in days that I felt even remotely human. After my shower, I came back to find the living room spotless. The kitchen sparkled too. The red-haired woman introduced herself as Jocelyn, Wesley's wife. She explained that she'd been trying to reach me at my office for the past 2 days but couldn't get through, so she decided to show up in person. Jocelyn wasn't here to beat around the bush. She dove straight into the chaos that was now our shared nightmare. Like me, she hadn't suspected a thing about Wesley's affair until he packed his bags, announced he was leaving, and said he'd send his assistant to collect the rest of his things. Her world had been shattered too, but instead of wallowing, she got to work. She went through Wesley's laptop, where she found his Facebook account still logged in. From there, she uncovered his messages, the affair, and every sordid detail. Once she had all the proof she needed, she didn't waste any time digging deeper. Jocelyn had scoured the documents related to my trust fund and discovered something even worse. Wesley had been siphoning money for personal use. It started small, so no one would notice, but over time, he grew reckless. And to make matters worse, Tessa had been helping him. I wanted to believe Jocelyn was lying, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had everything. She looked me in the eye and said, "I have a little daughter. I'm going to make Wesley pay for every cent he's stolen, and I'm going to ruin Tessa. I don't care what you do, but I thought you should know." Jocelyn's determination was undeniable. I knew right then I could trust her. So, I agreed to join her. We shook hands, and just like that, the plan to take down Tessa and Wesley was in motion. 10 days later, Tessa and Wesley returned from their Italian getaway, completely unaware of the storm waiting for them. Jocelyn and I were ready, and we didn't have to wait long. It was Monday morning when I got the call. Tessa's voice came through the line, frantic and shrill. "What the hell is happening?" "Wesley's freaking out, saying we're in trouble." "Where's my money?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, you mean my parents' money? The money Wesley used to buy you gifts and that fancy apartment? I hope you've already heard from my lawyer." I paused for effect. "You remember Jocelyn, right? Wesley's wife? She works at the same firm. Anyway, I've got to go." I hung up before she could say another word. That evening, as I left work, I spotted Tessa waiting outside. I pretended not to notice her and headed toward my car, but she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. I'd never seen her like this before, disheveled, panicked, desperate. "Nolan, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I need you to explain what's going on. Wesley's version doesn't make sense. I need to hear it from you." I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I heard from your lawyer about the divorce. Just so you know, you're not getting a single penny." The look on her face was priceless, a mix of shock, fear, and utter disbelief. I could see her panic growing with every word I said. And, honestly, it felt good to watch her squirm. But at the same time, there was this nagging guilt in the back of my mind because, despite everything, I still loved her. I couldn't stick around any longer. I walked past her, heading to my car. Behind me, I heard her yelling, begging me to stop. Her voice cracked as she screamed, "How could you do this to me?" I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to turn around and yell back, "How could you do this to me?" But I didn't. I just got in my car and drove off, leaving her standing there, dumbfounded, in my rearview mirror. Meanwhile, Wesley had been served a termination notice. His actions had tarnished the company's reputation, and once word got out, several clients began pulling their contracts. So, the best thing the company could do to salvage its reputation was fire Wesley. They wanted to distance themselves from the whole mess, especially since word had started leaking out. Clients were already threatening to terminate contracts, and Wesley's continued presence wasn't helping matters. Jocelyn had wasted no time. She tapped into her network of lawyer friends and secured one of the best attorneys in town. She was confident she'd win the case and get custody of her daughter. Every update came from Jocelyn as I drove back home that evening, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. When I got home, I decided to sit down and write this out. My encounter with Tessa earlier had left me feeling restless, and I needed an outlet. Writing helped me vent. But honestly, do you think I'm being too harsh on her? I'm torn. Update 1. Hi, everyone. I'm back with an update. It's been a week, and I want to thank you all for your support. Reading your comments helped pull me out of the confusion I was drowning in. This week, I had my first therapy session. I even showed my therapist this post, and he said it's a healthy way to cope. He explained that it's natural to grieve someone you lost even if that someone betrayed you. He said my feelings of guilt and overwhelm after confronting Tessa were perfectly normal. That validation gave me some much-needed clarity. Now, on to what happened this week. Tessa called me again. This time, her tone was completely different. Her voice sounded muffled, like she'd been crying. "Have you eaten dinner?" she asked softly. Caught off guard, I said, "No." She immediately offered, "Do you want me to come over and cook for you?" I froze, unsure of how to respond. I guess my silence gave her the wrong impression because she quickly added, "I'll be there in half an hour." That snapped me out of it. "No," I said firmly. No, you won't. Are you kidding me? After everything you've done, you want to come here, cook dinner, and pretend to play house? Baby, no, she cooed, her tone sickeningly sweet. I know things have been bad, but we can talk. Bad? I shouted, unable to hold back anymore. You call what you did bad? It was selfish. It was cruel. It was evil. To hell with you, Tessa. I don't ever want to see your face again. What the hell is wrong with you? And then, she said the thing that made me want to throw my phone across the room. Stop overreacting. That was it. That was the moment the guilt I'd been carrying around vanished. It hit me like a brick wall. Tessa didn't regret a single thing she'd done. She wasn't sorry. If given the chance, she'd do it all over again without hesitation. She kept talking, completely oblivious to my realization. She started rambling about how I was making her out to be a gold digger in the lawsuit, which wasn't fair because she had a job and was financially independent. I wanted to scream at her, to remind her how I had paid off every cent of her student loans, how my parents' money had allowed her to live so comfortably. But I bit my tongue. Tessa then claimed the lawsuit was pointless and urged me to drop it. We should talk this out, she said, and get back together. We can fix this. I couldn't stop myself from asking, what about Wesley? Her response was infuriating. Wesley was just different. He brought excitement into my life. Things with you were so monotonous. She then had the audacity to blame me for her cheating. You were always away for work. You were never there. Wesley was passionate, and you lacked that. Hearing her justify her betrayal was like pouring salt on an open wound. I shot back, if you were so unhappy, you could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling. But cheating? That's unforgivable. She ignored my words and insisted again on coming over. I hung up and immediately called Jocelyn. Jocelyn listened carefully, then said, "Call her back. Tell her she can come over." What? I asked, confused. Just trust me, she said. I'll be there too. Let's see what her real motive is. Reluctantly, I called Tessa back. She answered with a smug tone, as if she'd won something. I knew you'd come around, she said. I'll be there in half an hour. Jocelyn arrived first. She didn't have time to explain her plan fully, but she told me to keep Tessa in the dining room when she arrived. Jocelyn wanted to make a special appearance. When Tessa showed up, she'd clearly put in some effort to look good, Wesleyably to rekindle old feelings. She walked in, kissed me on the cheek, and made a beeline for the bedroom. I stopped her. Let's sit in the dining room, I said. She pouted and replied, but why, sweetheart? Did I lose my right so easily? Was your love that weak? Won't you fight for us? At that moment, Jocelyn walked out of the bedroom. Tessa froze, her face contorting into a mix of shock and confusion. What the hell, she croaked. Jocelyn smiled sweetly and said, "Ah, Tessa. Finally, we meet. The woman who's been sleeping with my useless husband, Wesley." Tessa whipped around to face me, fury in her eyes. How could you replace me so easily? You're sleeping with Wesley's wife now. You've taken everything from me. Wesley's lost his job. We're drowning in debt. And now, we won't even get the trust fund money. You're selfish. Jocelyn raised an eyebrow and asked, "What do you mean by we have debts? Are you saying you were involved in Wesley's little scheme? Were you helping him siphon money from the trust fund?" Tessa's mask slipped. "Hell yeah, I was," she shouted. "Wesley couldn't have pulled it off on his own. I was there every step of the way, supporting him. Unlike you, you condescending witch." Jocelyn remained calm, her smile never wavering. "Well, I think we've heard enough," she said, turning to me. "I think it's time to send Tessa on her way." I got the cue. I walked to the door and held it open. Tessa stormed out, spewing a string of insults and curses over her shoulder. Jocelyn and I stood in silence for a moment after she left. Then, we looked at each other and burst out laughing. The trap had worked perfectly. When Tessa stormed out that day, I turned to Jocelyn and asked, what just happened? She smiled, pressed the stop button on a tape recorder she'd hidden, and gave me a wink. Her eyes sparkled as she said, "We got a confession, Nolan. We're going to ruin them." Jocelyn had this look of pure satisfaction, she was excited, even. "I told you I'm not letting them walk away from this," she added, crossing her arms like some kind of legal superhero. And honestly? At that moment, I realized I wouldn't want to be Tessa or Wesley for anything in the world. Jocelyn's clever. Ruthless. If I were in their shoes, I'd be terrified of her. Before leaving, Jocelyn casually confessed it was her who'd leaked the news about Wesley's shady dealings to his company. I just laughed and told her she didn't need to say it, I'd already guessed. I mean, her whole vibe just screams 10 steps ahead. Update 2. Well, that didn't take long, huh? Here I am with another update, and trust me, you'll want to hear this. Jocelyn's a total force of nature. She sent the tape, yes, the one with Tessa's confession, to Tessa's company, along with a detailed explanation of the mess Tessa and Wesley had created. Jocelyn didn't just stop there. Oh, no. She also wrote a note saying that someone like Tessa, who could lie and manipulate people so thoroughly, wasn't someone the company could trust. Jocelyn even hinted that Tessa might embezzle funds if given the chance. Jocelyn also called in a favor from an old friend who happened to be one of the firm's business partners. That friend pulled out of a deal last minute, citing doubts about the credibility of certain team members. It was a domino effect. Tessa's boss was fuming and scrambling to salvage the deal. And just like that, Tessa got fired. Now Tessa and Wesley are both jobless and drowning in debt. Jocelyn tells me Wesley's been blowing up her phone, leaving desperate texts and voicemails. She blocked him, of course. Oh, and this part had me laughing. Apparently, Wesley got arrested, and Tessa had to dig into her savings to bail him out. What a mess. Serves them right. Update 3. This morning, Jocelyn called me, and she was furious. Wesley had shown up at her house drunk, ringing her doorbell non-stop, yelling, and calling her every name under the sun. Her security cameras caught the whole thing. When Jocelyn told him to leave, he tried to break in. The worst part? The commotion woke up Jocelyn's daughter, Elise. She's just a little kid, maybe 4 years old, and now she's terrified. Jocelyn had to head to the police station to file a restraining order, so she asked if I could watch Elise while she was gone. Of course, I said yes. When I got to their house, Jocelyn gave me a quick rundown and left in a hurry. I knocked on Elise's door, but she wouldn't answer. Feeling a growing sense of panic, I picked the lock. I don't know why, but the silence was making me imagine the worst. Inside, the room looked empty, but then I noticed a small movement. Elise was hiding under the bed, trembling like a leaf. When I knelt down, she asked in a shaky voice if Wesley had sent me. My heart broke right there. I told her no, that I was her mom's friend. She seemed to relax a little, but she kept glancing toward the window, asking if her dad was gone. I assured her he was and promised her that her mom was like a fierce tigress who'd protect her no matter what. That's when she burst into tears, saying she was scared Wesley would hurt her mom. I managed to coax her out and played her favorite Disney movie while heating up some lasagna. By the time Jocelyn came back, Elise had fallen asleep on my chest, and I dozed off myself. Jocelyn says I drooled on Elise's favorite pillow. That night, Elise begged me not to leave. She clung to my legs, crying and asking me to stay because she was scared Wesley would come back. I couldn't say no. I stayed, and for the first time in days, Elise slept peacefully. The next morning, Jocelyn made us pancakes, and Elise made me promise to come back that night. Looks like I've got a new routine now. Jocelyn's still looking for a child psychologist, but no luck yet. Update 4. It's been a while, but here I am with the latest update. The first court hearing is over, and let me tell you, Tessa and Wesley are toast. Like, cooked to a crisp. The evidence against them is so overwhelming that even a layman like me can tell this is an open and shut case. Jocelyn's lawyer estimates it'll wrap up in about 6 months, tops. Both Tessa and Wesley are likely looking at jail time. As for the divorce settlement, Tessa and Wesley won't see a penny. Wesley will also be required to pay child support, though I'm not sure how he'll manage that since he's currently working as a janitor at a club. Oh, and get this, outside the court, some loan sharks cornered Wesley and roughed him up. Jocelyn and I watched from a distance as he came crawling, literally, to Jocelyn's feet, begging her to take him back. He was crying, saying he couldn't survive without her. Jocelyn just looked at him like he was a bug under her shoe and walked away. So, yeah. That's where things stand. Wesley's life is in shambles, Tessa's got no job, and Jocelyn is absolutely thriving. I'll keep you all posted as things progress, but for now, it's safe to say karma's doing its thing.